The moment Roy Campbell shouted, "Now," everything changed. New Haven Colony erupted into action like a machine that had been waiting to spring its trap. The aliens had expected helpless victims, but instead they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before: humans who refused to accept defeat. Ben Torres was the first to strike. From the shuttle bay, he launched a modified mining shuttle directly at the nearest Zephyrian warship. The small craft, loaded with 3 tons of mining explosives, streaked across space toward the Blood Drinker. The alien ship's weapons tried to shoot it down, but the shuttle was too small and moving too fast. On the bridge of the Blood Drinker, the crew watched in confusion as the tiny human craft approached them. They had seen desperate attacks before, but this seemed almost suicidal. The shuttle was too small to cause significant damage to their massive warship. They were wrong. Ben had programmed the shuttle to target the ship's engine section, the mining. Explosives were designed to crack apart asteroids, and when they detonated against the alien ship's hull, they did exactly what they were meant to do. The explosion tore through the Blood Drinker's main engine, sending fragments of metal spinning. Into space, the alien warship lurched sideways, its power systems failing. Emergency lights flickered on across the ship as the crew tried to regain control. But Ben was already launching a second shuttle. This one aimed at the ship's weapon arrays at the same time. Lisa Parker activated the modified industrial lasers. 6 beams of intense energy lanced out from the colony, each one focused on a different target. The lasers were designed to cut through the hardest materials in space, and the alien ship hulls, while strong, were not immune to their power. The first laser beam struck the Soul Render's main gun, slicing through the weapon mount and rendering it useless. The second beam cut into the ship's communication array, leaving the crew unable to coordinate with the other ships. The third and fourth beams targeted the vessel's shield generators, causing sparks and explosions along the hull. War Commander Vexall watched in growing alarm as his fleet came under attack. This was not supposed to happen. The humans had no weapons, no defenses, no military capability. Yet somehow they were damaging his warships with industrial equipment and mining tools. "All ships, focus fire on the colony," Vexall ordered. "Destroy them immediately." But Frank Rivera had been waiting for this moment. As soon as the alien ships tried to coordinate their attack, he activated the communication jamming system. The jerry-rigged equipment, built from spare parts and determination, sent out a wave of electronic interference that disrupted the aliens' ability to talk to each other. The 3 Zephyrian ships suddenly found themselves fighting alone, unable to coordinate their attacks or share information. Each captain had to make decisions based on what he could see. Without knowing what the other ships were doing, Ganny Foster was ready with the next surprise. As the alien ships moved closer to the colony, trying to get better firing angles, he triggered the fusion reactor overload. The colony's main power plant, pushed far beyond its safety limits, released a massive electromagnetic pulse that rippled outward like an invisible wave. The EMP struck the alien ships just as they were preparing their main attack. Electronic systems throughout the fleet flickered and failed. Navigation computers crashed. Weapon targeting systems went offline. Emergency lighting replaced the normal illumination on all 3 ships. Sue Wells watched her power distribution readouts and smiled grimly. The EMP had damaged some of the colony's systems too, but she had been ready for it. She quickly rerouted power around the damaged circuits, keeping the colony's weapons operational while the alien ships struggled to restart their computers. Carlos Martinez launched the 3rd mining shuttle, this one packed with shaped charges, designed to penetrate deep into a target before exploding. The shuttle slammed into the Bone Crusher's hull near the command section, and the explosion sent shockwaves through the massive ship. On the bridge of the Bone Crusher, Vexall was thrown to the floor as his ship shuddered under the impact. Emergency alarms wailed throughout the vessel. His tactical display showed critical damage to multiple systems. Two of his ships were badly damaged, and the third was struggling to restore basic functions. How is this possible? Vexall demanded. They're primitives. They have no military technology. Sub-Commander Vexstar pulled himself up from the floor, his scaled face bleeding from a cut. Sir, they're using industrial equipment as weapons. Their tactics are completely unpredictable. Helen Wright chose that moment to release the agricultural chemicals through the colony's external vents. The corrosive compounds, designed to break down soil minerals for plant growth, ate through the alien ship hulls like acid. Holes appeared in the blood drinker's armor plating, venting atmosphere into space-stop Pete Collins, operating one of the modified lasers, targeted the Soul Renders. Main engine. The industrial beam cut through the ship's power conduits, causing a cascade of failures throughout the vessel. The alien ship began to drift, its engines dead and its weapons offline. Ben Torres launched the fourth shuttle, this one aimed at the Bone Crusher's weapon systems. But the alien ship's crew had learned from the previous attacks. They managed to shoot down the shuttle before it reached its target. The explosion lit up space between the ships, but caused no damage to the warship. Finally, Vexall snarled. All ships, target their shuttle bay. Stop those suicide attacks. The remaining alien weapons opened fire on New Haven's shuttle bay, tearing through the metal structure and destroying the last two mining shuttles. But the damage was already done. Two of the three warships were crippled, and the third was operating at reduced capacity. Lisa Parker switched the laser targeting to the Bone Crusher, the only ship still capable of serious combat. 4 laser beams focused on the warship's shield generators, overloading them with sustained fire. The alien shields flickered and failed. Leaving the ship's hull exposed, Roy Campbell coordinated the final phase of the attack from the communications center. All teams, concentrate on the flagship. It's the only one that can still fight effectively. The colonists poured everything they had into attacking the Bone Crusher. The remaining mining explosives were launched in small packages using the colony's cargo airlocks. The chemical dispersal system pumped more corrosive compounds into space around the alien ship. Every modified laser focused its beam on critical systems. Vexall realized that his invasion fleet was being defeated by a handful of miners and farmers using improvised weapons. The humans had turned their entire colony into a trap, using their knowledge of industrial systems to create weapons that his military analysts had never anticipated. Retreat, Vexall ordered. All ships, withdraw immediately. But the blood drinker could not comply. Its engines were destroyed, and its hull was breached in multiple places. The crew was abandoning ship, escaping in small pods as their vessel died around them. The Soul Render tried to retreat, but its navigation systems were still offline from the EMP. The ship drifted helplessly while its crew struggled to restart. The main computers. The Bone Crusher still had some power, but it was taking heavy damage from the colonists' coordinated attack. Vexall made the hardest decision of his military career. Abandon ship, he ordered. All crew to the escape pods. Amy Rodriguez watched her scanner as the alien ships fell silent one by one. The blood drinker was a dead hulk, leaking atmosphere and debris. The Soul Render was drifting without power. The Bone Crusher was venting plasma from multiple hull breaches as its crew evacuated. Roy, Amy called out, her voice filled with amazement. I think we won. Roy looked at the chronometer on his display. From the moment he had given the order to attack until the last alien ship fell silent, exactly 7 minutes had passed. 7 minutes in which a colony of miners and farmers had destroyed a military fleet using nothing but determination and creativity. The defenders of New Haven colonies stood in their damaged but still functional home, surrounded by the wreckage of ships that had come to destroy them. They had proven something that would echo across the galaxy. Humans were not easy prey, and they would never surrender without a fight. The 7-minute battle was over, but its consequences would last for generations. Roy Campbell stood in the communications center, watching the alien ships grow larger on the scanner display. 3 minutes until they arrived. He had seen combat before, but never like this. In the military, he had proper weapons, trained soldiers, and clear orders. Here, he had miners, farmers, and engineers who had never fired a shot in anger. But as Roy looked around at the determined faces of the colonists, he realized something important. These people had something that many trained soldiers lacked. They were fighting for their home, their families, and their way of life. That made them more dangerous than any alien commander could imagine. "Final systems check," Roy announced. Over the intercom, all teams report status. Danny Foster's voice crackled through the speakers from the reactor chamber. "Fusion reactor is ready for overload. EMP will be available on your command." Lisa Parker reported next from the laser control station. All 6 industrial lasers are modified and operational. Power output is 3 times normal, but we can only maintain it for short bursts. Ben Torres was in the shuttle bay, making last-minute adjustments to the explosive-laden mining craft. Shuttles are loaded and ready. Remote piloting systems are online. Just give me targets. Sue Wells was at the main power distribution center. Colony power grid is stable. I can reroute power to any system that needs it. Frank Rivera checked in from the communications jamming station. Jamming equipment is ready. We can disrupt their communications when you give the word. Roy nodded with satisfaction. In less than 30 minutes, the colonists had transformed their peaceful settlement into a trap. It was not pretty, and it was not professional, but it might work. Jake Morrison joined Roy at the command station. "Any last-minute thoughts?" "We're about to find out what humans are really made of," Roy replied. "These aliens think they know us, but they've never met people like this." Amy Rodriguez looked up from her scanner. "The alien ships are slowing down. They're taking formation around the colony." On the main display, the 3 Zephyrian warships arranged themselves in a triangle around New Haven Colony. Each ship was massive, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields. They moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey was helpless. War Commander Dexal opened a communication channel. His voice echoed through the colony's speakers, translated by the computer into human language. "Humans of New Haven Colony, I am War Commander Dexal of the Zephyrian Dominion. You will surrender immediately and prepare for processing. Resistance will result in total annihilation." Roy picked up the communication device and looked at Jake. "Your colony, your call." Jake took the device and pressed the transmit button. "This is Administrator Jake Morrison of New Haven Colony. We decline your offer." The silence that followed stretched for several seconds. Then Dexal's voice returned, filled with cold amusement. "You decline? Do you not understand your situation? We have 3 warships. You have nothing." "We have our home," Jake replied simply. "And we're not giving it up." Roy heard something in Jake's voice that made him smile. It was the same tone that farmers use when they refuse to sell their land to developers. It was the voice of someone who had decided that some things were worth fighting for. Dexal's response was harsh. "Then you will die, all of you, and your deaths will be broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to other humans who think they can defy the Dominion." "Maybe," Jake said. "But you'll remember this place." The communication channel closed. Roy could see the alien ships begin to move into attack position. Their weapons were powering up, casting an eerie glow against the hulls of the massive vessels. "All stations, prepare for combat," Roy announced. "Remember the plan. We let them get close, then we hit them with everything at once." In the medical station that Dr. Corinne Lewis had set up in the mine shaft, the non-combatants waited in tense silence. Martha Davis kept the children calm by having them sing songs, but the adults could hear the tension in her voice. They all knew what was happening above them. Old Pete Collins had refused to go to the safe area. Despite being in his 60s, he had insisted on staying with the defenders. "I helped build this place," he had said. "I'm not hiding while others fight for it." Now Pete was at one of the laser control stations. his weathered hand steady on. The controls. He had never operated a weapon before, but he understood machinery. And right now, the modified industrial laser was just another machine that needed to be operated properly. Helen Wright was at the chemical dispersal station, ready to release the corrosive agricultural chemicals through the colony's external vents. She had spent years working with these chemicals to help plants grow. Now she was using them to burn through alien ship hulls. Carlos Martinez was in the shuttle bay with Ben Torres, helping coordinate the explosive delivery system. The mining engineer had spent his career making controlled explosions to break apart asteroids. Tonight, he was using the same skills to break apart warships. Sue Wells was monitoring the power systems, ready to reroute electricity wherever it was needed most. She had kept the colony's aging power grid running for 3 years. Now she was using that knowledge to give the defenders every advantage possible. Frank Rivera was at the communication jamming station, waiting for the signal to disrupt the aliens' coordination. He had learned about electronic warfare from technical manuals, but tonight he would put that knowledge to the test. The alien ships moved closer, their weapons fully charged. Roy could see the energy building in their weapon arrays. In a few seconds, they would begin firing, and the battle would start. "This is it," Roy announced. "All teams stand by." But something unexpected happened. Instead of immediately opening fire, the Zephyrian ships paused. They seemed to be scanning the colony more carefully, as if they were puzzled by what they were seeing. On the Bone Crusher, Sub-Commander Vexstar was reviewing the sensor readings. "War Commander, the colony's energy signatures are unusual. Their power systems are running at maximum output." Vexstar frowned. "Are they trying to run?" "Negative. All power is being directed to internal systems. It's almost as if they're preparing for something." Preparing for what? "They have no weapons." But even as Dexal spoke, he felt a nagging doubt. In his long career of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, something felt wrong about this situation. The humans were not reacting the way conquered species usually did. There was no panic, no desperate attempts to flee, no begging for mercy. Instead, there was an ominous silence from the colony, as if they were waiting for something. "Begin the attack," Vexal ordered. "Target their power systems first. I want them helpless before we board." The 3 Zephyrian warships opened fire, their energy weapons lancing out toward New Haven Colony. The first shot struck the colony's outer hull, causing explosions and damage. But the colony's power systems remained online, and the humans did not respond. Roy watched the enemy fire and waited for the right moment. The alien ships were moving closer, trying to position themselves for maximum damage. They were acting exactly as he had hoped they would. "Steady," Roy said over the intercom. "Let them get confident. Let them think we're helpless." More energy blasts struck the colony. The outer hull was taking damage, but the critical systems were protected deep. Inside, the aliens were being careful, trying to disable rather than destroy. They wanted survivors to spread their message of terror. That caution would be their downfall. "Now," Roy shouted, "all teams, execute!" The battle for New Haven Colony began not with a single shot, but with a coordinated explosion of human ingenuity and determination. The colonists had spent their lives solving problems with limited resources and unlimited creativity. Now they were about to show the galaxy what humans could do when they refused to surrender. The next few minutes would prove that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Jake Morrison looked around the crowded communications center and made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to run or hide, he was going to fight. The idea seemed crazy, but it was the only choice that felt right. "Everyone, listen to me," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "We have 38 minutes before those ships reach us. We can't outrun them, and we can't hide from them. So we're going to do something they won't expect." Pete Collins raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" We're going to fight back. The room erupted in surprised voices. Dr. Karen Lewis shook her head. Jake, we don't have any weapons. We're miners and farmers, not soldiers. That's exactly why we might have a chance, Jake replied. They're expecting us to act like helpless victims. But we're not helpless. We're survivors. We've kept this colony running for years with nothing but spare parts and determination. Lisa Parker stepped forward, her eyes bright with understanding. You're talking about using what we have. The mining equipment, the industrial systems, everything we've built here. Exactly. Amy, send the message to every person in the colony. Tell them to meet in the main assembly hall immediately. Tell them. We're going to fight, and we need everyone. Amy's fingers flew over the communication controls. Within minutes, her voice was echoing through every room and corridor of New Haven Colony. All residents report to the main assembly hall immediately. This is not a drill. All residents report to the main assembly hall. The assembly hall was the largest space in the colony, originally designed for community meetings and celebrations. As people filed in, Jake could see the fear in their faces. Parents held their children close. Elderly residents looked confused and worried. But underneath the fear, Jake saw something else. Determination. Martha Davis, the school teacher, raised her hand. Jake, what's happening out there? 3 alien warships are approaching our colony, Jake said simply. They'll be here in 35 minutes. We don't know what they want, but their ships are armed and they're not responding to our communications. The hall fell silent. Several people gasped, and a few children started crying. But nobody ran. Nobody started screaming. These were people who had faced hardship before. Carlos Martinez, the mining engineer, stood up. What can we do against warships? We don't have any weapons. We have mining explosives, Jake said. We have industrial equipment. We have knowledge of every system in this colony. And we have each other. Roy Campbell, an older man who rarely spoke about his past, walked to the front of the hall. Jake knew Roy had been in the military years ago, but the man had never talked about it. Now Roy's posture was straight, and his eyes were sharp. If we're going to do this, we need to be smart. About it, Roy said. What kind of ships are we dealing with? Amy consulted her tablet. 3 vessels, each approximately 1 kilometer long. Heavy armor, multiple weapon systems, advanced shielding. They're designed for warfare, Roy nodded. Then we can't fight. Them ship to ship. We need to use surprise and make them come to us. What assets do we have? Lisa Parker stepped forward. 6 mining shuttles, each capable of carrying 20 tons of cargo. The main ore processing facility has industrial lasers. That could be modified. We have about 3 tons of mining explosives, mostly shaped charges for asteroid cracking. The fusion reactor, added Danny Foster, the colony's power technician. It's old but stable. If we overload it, we could create an electromagnetic pulse. Helen Wright raised her hand. The agriculture section has industrial chemicals for soil treatment. Some of them are quite corrosive. Jake felt a spark of hope. Roy, can you coordinate this? You have military experience. Roy nodded grimly. I was a sergeant in the Earth Defense Force 23 years ago. I've seen combat. He looked around the hall. If we do this, some of us might not survive. Everyone needs to understand that. Sue Wells, a young technician, spoke up. We might not survive if we don't fight either. At least this way, we have a chance. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jake saw heads nodding, faces becoming determined. These people had chosen to live on the edge of space because they were not afraid of taking risks. All right, Roy said, taking charge. We need to work fast. Danny, take a team and start preparing the reactor overload. We'll need it timed perfectly. Lisa, get your best people working on those mining shuttles. Load them with explosives and set them up for remote piloting. What about the children? Asked Martha Davis. Evacuation to the deepest mine shafts. Roy replied, Those are the safest places in the colony. Martha, take all the children and anyone who can't fight. Seal yourselves in and wait. Dr. Corinne Lewis stepped forward. I'll set up a medical station in the mine shafts. We'll need to treat injuries. Roy continued giving orders. Ben Torres, you're our best shuttle pilot. I need you to rig those shuttles for one-way trips. Sue, work with Lisa on modifying the industrial lasers. We need them to cut through ship armor. Jake watched as the colonists organized themselves with remarkable efficiency. These people had worked together for years, solving problems and keeping their community alive. Now they were applying those same skills to warfare. Carlos Martinez approached Jake. The mining explosives are powerful, but they're designed for breaking rock, not ship hulls. We need to modify them. What do you need? Time and workspace. And someone who understands alien ship construction. Amy looked up from her communication station. I've been analyzing the scanner data. Their ships seem to have a standard design: main hull, engine section, command structure. If we can disable their engines, they'll be sitting targets. Frank Rivera, another engineer, joined the conversation. The ore processing lasers are industrial grade. They're designed to cut through the hardest materials. If we can increase their power output and focus the beams, they might penetrate alien armor. How long do we have? Jake asked. Amy checked her instruments. 28 minutes. The next 28 minutes became a blur of frantic activity. The colonists split into teams, each working on different aspects of the defense. The mining shuttles were loaded with explosives and rigged for remote control. The industrial lasers were modified and repositioned. The fusion reactor was prepared. For controlled overload dot in the deepest mine shaft, Martha Davis gathered all the children and elderly residents. The space was cramped and dark, but it was the safest place in the colony. She tried to keep the children calm by telling them stories, but her own hands were shaking. Meanwhile, Ben Torres was in the shuttle bay, making final preparations to the mining craft. Each shuttle was now a flying bomb, capable of delivering tons of explosives to an enemy ship. The control systems had been modified so the shuttles could be piloted remotely from the colony's communications center. Lisa Parker was working on the industrial lasers with a team of technicians. The modifications were crude but effective. By bypassing safety systems and overloading the power cells, they had tripled the cutting power of each laser. Danny Foster was in the reactor chamber, setting up the electromagnetic pulse. The plan was risky. If the timing was wrong, the pulse could damage the colony's own systems. But if it worked, it would disable the aliens' electronics at a crucial moment. Roy Campbell coordinated everything from the communications center. His military training had returned as if he had never left the service. He assigned positions, checked equipment, and made sure everyone understood their role dot with 5 minutes remaining. Roy addressed the defenders over the intercom. This is it, people. We've done everything we can. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to survive. Use every advantage we have. Work together, watch each other's backs, and make them pay for every meter of space. Jake stood at the observation deck, watching the alien ships approach. They were visible now as points of light growing larger against the stars. In a few minutes, those ships would be close enough to attack. The colonists of New Haven were about to face the greatest test of their lives. But as Jake looked around at his people, he felt a strange calm. These were not professional soldiers or trained warriors. They were ordinary people who had chosen to make an extraordinary stand. They had turned their home into a fortress and their tools into weapons. Most importantly, they had chosen to fight together. Whatever happened in the next few minutes, Jake knew that New Haven Colony would not surrender without a fight. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. War Commander Dexall stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, and studied the holographic display showing human space. His 3 warships had been traveling for weeks, moving through the outer edges of the galaxy where the weak Species tried to hide from their betters. The Zephyrian Dominion had been expanding for centuries, and humans were just the latest species to be brought under their control. Vexal was tall and covered in dark scales that reflected the blue light of the ship's controls. His eyes were yellow and cold, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds. He had been chosen for this mission because he was known for his efficiency. The Dominion wanted to send a message to humanity, and Vexal would deliver it with brutal clarity. "Sub-Commander Vexstar, show me the target again," Vexal commanded. The display changed to show a small space station surrounded by mining equipment. The station looked old and poorly maintained. There were no defensive weapons visible, no military ships nearby, and no signs of advanced technology. According to their intelligence, only a few hundred humans lived there. New Haven Colony, Vexstar reported. Population 847. Primary activity is asteroid mining. No military presence. No significant defenses. Our analysis indicates they could be eliminated in less than 10 minutes. Vexal nodded with satisfaction. Perfect. The humans will understand what happens when they refuse to submit to the Dominion. This pathetic settlement will be an example to all their colonies. The plan was simple but effective. The Zephyrian fleet would approach New Haven and demand immediate surrender. When the humans refused, as they always did, the 3 warships would destroy the colony completely. The entire attack would be broadcast across the galaxy using the Dominion's communication network. Every species would see what happened to those who opposed Zephyrian rule. The 3 ships of Vexal's fleet were impressive weapons of war. The Bone Crusher was the largest, carrying enough firepower to level a small city. The Blood Drinker and Soul Render were smaller but equally deadly. Each ship had shields that could withstand massive attacks, weapons that could cut through any known material, and crews trained for conquest. The Zephyrians had built their empire by finding weak targets first. They would attack settlements that could not defend themselves, then use the fear this created to make stronger colonies surrender without fighting. It was a strategy that had worked for generations. Meanwhile, on New Haven Colony, Amy Rodriguez was working the night shift in the communication center. The room was small and cramped, filled with equipment that was older than she was. Most of it had been salvaged from abandoned ships or bought secondhand from traders who felt sorry for the colonists. Amy was 26 years old, and she had short black hair that she kept tied back while working. She had joined New Haven when her transport ship broke down, and she could not afford passage to anywhere else. She had expected to stay for a few months, but 2 years later, she was still here. The colony had become her home, and the people had become her family. The communication equipment was quiet except for the usual background chatter from shipping routes and other colonies. Amy was reading a book on her tablet when the long-range scanner started beeping. She looked up and frowned. The scanner was not very good, but it was sensitive enough to detect large ships approaching from a distance. She adjusted the controls and tried to get a clearer reading. 3 objects were moving toward New Haven Colony. They were too big to be cargo ships and too fast to be civilian vessels. Amy felt a cold fear in her stomach as she realized what she was looking at. Computer, identify the incoming ships, she said. The computer's voice was flat and mechanical. Unable to identify. Ships are of unknown design. Estimated arrival time, 57 minutes. Amy's hands moved quickly over the controls. She tried to contact the approaching ships, but got no response. She attempted to scan them more closely, but their technology was too advanced for New Haven's old equipment. All she could determine was that they were large, fast, and heading directly for the colony. She activated the emergency communication system and called Jake Morrison. The administrator answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Amy, what's wrong?" "Jake, we have 3 unknown ships approaching the colony. They're big and they're not responding to our communications. They'll be here in less than an hour." Jake was quiet for a moment. Amy could hear him getting out of bed, and moving around his quarters. Are you sure they're heading for us? Their course is direct. No deviation. And Jake, these ships are unlike anything in our databases. They're not human. The silence on the communication line stretched for several seconds. New Haven had never been contacted by alien species before. Most of the colonies on the frontier had heard rumors about other civilizations, but few had any direct contact. I'm on my way to the communications center, Jake said finally. Send an emergency message to all department heads. Tell them to meet me there immediately. Amy began sending the emergency alerts. Within minutes, her small communications center was crowded with people. Pete Collins arrived first, still wearing his work clothes from the late mining shift. Lisa Parker came next, carrying a toolbox because she had been working on the life support systems. Helen Wright hurried in from the agriculture section, followed by several other senior colonists. Jake arrived and immediately went to the scanner display. The three ships were closer now, and their size was becoming clear. Each one was at least 10 times larger than New Haven Colony itself. Have they responded to any communications? Jake asked. Amy shook her head. Nothing. I've tried every frequency we have. Either they can't hear us or they're choosing not to answer. Dr. Karen Lewis, the colony's chief medical officer, spoke up. Could they be explorers? Maybe they're just curious about us. Pete Collins looked skeptical. 3 military-sized ships traveling together? That's not exploration. That's a fleet. Lisa Parker was studying the scanner readings with her engineer's eye. Look at the energy signatures. These ships are running hot. All their systems are active, including what looks like weapons arrays. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. As administrator, the safety of 847 people was his job. But New Haven had no defenses, no weapons, and no way to contact Earth Command for help. Even if they could call for assistance, no rescue would arrive in time. How long until they reach us? He asked. Amy checked her instruments. 43 minutes. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the situation. Unknown aliens were approaching. Their defenseless colony with what appeared to be a military fleet. The colonists had no way to fight back and nowhere to run. On the Bone Crusher, Vexal was reviewing the final details of the attack. His ships would drop out of faster-than-light travel just outside the colony's sensor range. They would approach, slowly, giving the humans time to detect them and become afraid. Fear was an important part of the message the Dominion wanted to send. All ships, prepare for normal space transition, Vexal ordered. Remember, we want survivors to spread word of what happened here. Kill most of them, but leave enough alive to tell the story. The 3 Zephyrian warships dropped back into normal space with flashes of twisted light. Their sensors immediately locked onto New Haven Colony, and their weapon systems began charging. The small human settlement appeared on their screens like a target waiting to be destroyed. Vexel smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. In less than an hour, New Haven would be nothing but debris floating in space. The message would be clear. Humans who refused to submit to the Dominion would die. It was a lesson that would save the Zephyrians time and effort as they conquered the rest of human space. But War Commander Dexal had made one critical error in his planning. He had assumed that the humans of New Haven would react like the other species the Dominion had conquered. He expected them to panic, to beg for mercy, or to try to flee. He had not considered that humans might choose to fight back, especially humans who had spent years learning to survive against impossible odds. The next hour would teach the Zephyrian Dominion something new about the species they had chosen to conquer, and the lesson would be written in the wreckage of their own ships. Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of New Haven Colony's main building and looked out at the stars. The metal floor beneath his feet shook slightly as the mining equipment worked in the asteroid fields nearby. He was used to the vibration by now. After 3 years as administrator of this small settlement, he knew every sound the colony made. New Haven was not much to look at. 847 people lived here on a collection of connected buildings floating in space. The buildings were old and patched with whatever materials they could find. The paint was faded, and many of the windows had cracks that were sealed with clear tape. It was the kind of place that more successful colonies looked down on. Jake had been an engineer before he took this job. He was good at fixing things, which was exactly what New Haven needed. The colony was always breaking down. The air recyclers needed constant attention. The water purifiers made strange noises. The power generators were older than some of the people who live here. But somehow, they kept everything running. Pete Collins walked into the observation deck carrying a cup of coffee that smelled like it had been made from recycled water, which it probably had been. Pete was the mining foreman, a big man with hands that were permanently stained with grease and dirt. He had been at New Haven longer than anyone except old Martha Davis, who ran the small school. "Morning, Jake," Pete said, handing him the coffee. The morning shift pulled in a good haul from Asteroid Field 7. Lots of iron and some rare metals. Should keep us going for another month. Jake took the coffee and made a face at the taste. "Any word from Earth about those new air filters we requested?" Pete shook his head. "Nothing yet. But Lisa thinks she can rebuild the old ones again. That woman can fix anything with spare parts and determination." Lisa Parker was the colony's head mechanic. She was small but tough, with short red hair, and oil under her fingernails. She could take apart any machine and put it back together better than before. The colony would have died years ago without her skills. Jake looked back out at the stars. In the distance, he could see the lights of other ships and stations. But none of them were coming to New Haven. They never did. The colony was too small, too poor, and too far from the main shipping routes to matter to anyone. "Sometimes I wonder why we stay here," Jake said quietly. Pete laughed. "Because someone has to. And because we're too stubborn to quit." That was the truth. The people of New Haven were the kind of people who did not give up easily. They were families who had come to the edge of human space looking for a better life. They were workers who had been laid off from bigger colonies. They were people who had nowhere else to go, so they made this place their home. The colony had started as a mining operation 15 years ago. A company called Stellar Resources had found rich asteroid fields in this area and built a small station to process the ore. But when the easy minerals were gone, the company abandoned the station. The workers who were left behind decided to stay and keep mining on their own. It was not easy. They had to learn how to grow food in the small agriculture sections. They had to figure out how to maintain equipment without proper parts. They had to make do with secondhand everything. But they survived because they worked together. Jake's communicator beeped. He pressed the button and heard Amy Rodriguez's voice. Amy was the communications officer, a young woman who had joined the colony 2 years ago when her transport ship broke down and could not afford repairs. "Jake, we're getting a message from Earth Command. They want to know our current population and defense status." Jake frowned. Earth Command rarely contacted New Haven directly. Usually they just sent automated messages about regulations or tax requirements. "Put it through to my office. I'll be right there." He walked down the corridor to his office, passing the common area where several families were eating breakfast. The children were getting ready for school with Martha Davis. The adults were preparing for their work shifts. It was a normal morning in a place that had learned to make normal out of difficult circumstances. Jake's office was small and cluttered with repair manuals, mining reports, and requests for supplies that would probably never come. His desk was an old table that Pete had welded together from scrap metal. His chair squeaked when he sat down, but it was comfortable. The message from Earth Command was short and official. They wanted updated information about New Haven's population, resources, and defensive capabilities. Jake almost laughed at the last part. Defensive capabilities? New Haven had no weapons except for some mining explosives and a few old emergency pistols that probably did not work anymore. He filled out the report honestly. Population, 847. Primary resources: asteroid mining, limited agriculture, defensive capabilities, none. He sent it back to Earth and forgot about it. What Jake did not know was that his report would be filed away in a database that many people could access. He did not know that other civilizations sometimes looked at human settlements to understand their capabilities. He did not know that New Haven's lack of defenses had been noted by intelligence services that were not human. The day continued normally. Jake spent the morning helping Lisa repair a broken ore processor. The machine was 20 years old and held together with spare parts from 6 different manufacturers. But Lisa had a plan to make it work better than ever. "The problem is the power coupling," she explained while lying on her back under the machine. "The original part was designed for a different power system. But if we modify the connection and add a voltage regulator, we can make it more efficient." Jake held the tools and watched her work. Lisa had learned engineering from necessity. She had never been to a proper school for it, but she understood machines better than most people with expensive degrees. In the afternoon, Jake walked through the residential sections. He checked on the families and made sure everyone had what they needed. Helen Wright was working in the agriculture bay, growing vegetables in artificial soil under bright lights. She had been a farmer on Earth before coming to New Haven, and she had adapted her knowledge to space farming. "The tomatoes are coming along well," she told Jake. "We should have a good harvest next month. And I've been experimenting with some new protein crops that might grow better in low gravity." The children were playing in the recreation area after school. They had been born here or brought here as babies, so this was the only home they knew. They did not think it was strange to live on a space station. They did not know that other people thought New Haven was poor and unimportant. As evening came, Jake returned to the observation deck. The stars looked the same as always, distant and beautiful. The mining equipment continued its work with steady, familiar sounds. The colony's lights reflected off the nearby asteroids, creating a small bubble of human presence in the vast darkness of space. Jake did not know that far away, in a different part of the galaxy, military leaders were looking at reports about human settlements. He did not know that New Haven's name was on a list of targets considered too weak to defend themselves. He did not know that forces were already moving that would test everything the colonists had built together. But even if he had known, Jake Morrison would not have been worried. The people of New Haven had survived everything that space had thrown at them so far. They had learned to fix what was broken, to make do with what they had, and to never give up. They were not soldiers or heroes. They were just ordinary people who had chosen to make a life in an extraordinary place. And that, though none of them realized it yet, was exactly what would save them.